Hi everyone. I'm going to go over a question from our week 1 homework that some of you seem to struggle with a little bit. So I thought it might be important to take some extra time to make sure everyone understands this concept and help you guys lay the foundation for the stuff that will come later. So my numbers are going to be a little bit different than what you might have seen in your homework. The homework changes the numbers every time, so I'm going to use the same principle, the same setup. The numbers just will be a little different than what you saw. So this was number 6 from your week 1 homework, and it showed you 2 countries and their production possibility frontier. That's the PPF, as it's called for short. And this is in our simple trade model where you have 2 countries and 2 goods. And we are going to look at the comparative advantage between the 2 countries. So in the simple model, 2 countries, 2 goods, we have the PPF for each country. And in this case, the 2 goods are oil, and those are measured of production in millions of barrels, and corn, measured in millions of bushels. So we see that for Canada, that's just the country that I'm calling country A. Canada has a production possibility frontier that looks like this, so they can produce anywhere on this curve. And the endpoints here that are labeled on our axis, that just lets us know if we wanted to make, let's say, 0, if Canada wanted to produce no corn, they could give up all of their corn production to produce 300 million barrels of oil, and vice versa. If they wanted to give up all oil production, they could produce 300 million bushels of corn. And then if they wanted to produce any combination, they could produce anywhere up to this line. So you would just calculate where on that line they would be. So for Mexico, we see a similar setup, but of course our intercepts here are different, so the slope of the line is different. In Mexico's case, if they wanted to give up all oil production, I label this as corn. If they wanted to give up all oil production, they could produce 380 bushels of corn. If they wanted to give up all corn production, they could produce 250 barrels of oil. So the first question in your homework assignment asks, from the PPF shown above, it can be determined that the opportunity cost of oil is lower in which country? So when they say the opportunity cost, remember, this simply means what you give up to get something else. So the opportunity cost of oil is how much corn they have to give up to get that oil. So since the only numbers we have to work with are the absolute numbers, if you give up all the corn, those are the numbers that we'll use. So in Canada's case, and I'll change colors so hopefully you can all see this, in order to get 300 barrels of oil, they have to give up 300 bushels of corn. So think of this as the price of oil for Canada in terms of oil. How much does corn cost them? How much does it cost to give up? So in this case, it costs them 300 million, we'll just use 300, but it's 300 million bushels of corn. I'll just write corn here so we know what we're talking about, for the 300 million barrels of oil that they want to produce. So the denominator is oil. It's what they're trying to get. So they're giving up the 300 million barrels of corn to get the 300 million barrels of oil. In Mexico, you see different numbers. So we're going to see which opportunity cost is lower. In Mexico, they have to give up 380 million bushels of corn to get just 250 barrels of oil. So if we were to reduce these fractions, fun stuff that you learned back in algebra, not even, you would see that this equals 1, and this equals, you get out your calculator, it's going to be some number greater than 1. It's going to be 1 point something. It's going to be 1 and change. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it's going to be about 1.5. It's a little less than that. So Canada can produce oil more cheaply when we think of it in terms of corn given up. So they give up less corn to get their oil than Mexico would. So in this case, Canada has the comparative advantage in oil. So the second question wants you to look at the flip side. What does Mexico have the comparative advantage in? Well, Mexico has the comparative advantage in corn. So we flip this and we say, all right, if they have to give up 380 bushels of corn to get 250 million barrels of oil, we can also look at that the other way. They only need to give up 250 million barrels of oil to get 380 bushels of corn. Canada has to give up 300 million barrels of oil, so they have to give up more oil to get less corn than Mexico does. So clearly Mexico has the lower cost. We would just literally flip each of these two. This one stays the same, Canada's, because it happens to be one. But if we were to flip this one and do it in terms of corn instead of in terms of oil, we would see that the opportunity cost of corn is lower in Mexico than it is in Canada. And you could do this with a million examples, but the beauty of comparative advantage is because it's a ratio, because you're comparing two ratios with just two goods, if one country has the comparative advantage in the one good, the other country must have the comparative advantage in the other good. The only time you won't see that is if both countries have equal opportunity cost in both goods, in which case there will be no gains from trade because they produce both things at the same level of efficiency. So to answer the second question, we can say that Mexico has the comparative advantage in corn. And then the last question here, which most of the class did answer correctly, but just for completion's sake. After these two countries specialize in trade with each other, country A, which is Canada, in our case, Canada will import corn in this situation. In this very simple model, where there's just two countries, two goods, you only produce where you have the comparative advantage and you import everything of the other good, in this case corn, from your trading partner, which is Mexico here. So this is a simple example of using the basic Ricardian theory of comparative advantage to explain opportunity cost, comparative advantage, and potential gains from trade.